slogan. Welcome, everyone. So, first of all, I really want to appreciate all the efforts that have been put by the First Con in setting up this conference. It's been amazing. And thanks for everyone who are going to attend this talk. We'll make sure in the next 30 to 35 minutes, we'll have a great discussion on the threat intelligence and the topics that we want to present. And definitely we will learn something new things out of it. And let's get it started. So today we are going to talk about compromise the keys to the kingdom, exfiltrating data to own and operate the exploited systems. The purpose of this talk is to actually highlight how exactly attackers are using command and control panels for controlling compromised systems, which are basically the infected systems on the internet, and why attackers are actually using that as centralized mechanism to do that. But as a researchers, why we really need to compromise them to extract the stolen data to understand how exactly these infections are being triggered. And in additionally, we want to make sure that we are able to build a great threat intelligence out of it. So let's get it started. A brief background of mine. We've been working in this industry for the last 15 years and, I published a couple of interesting books in the same space. Been into this, doing threat intelligence, security research for a long period of time. And the basic purpose and motivation behind this research is also to share this research with the security community so that as a collaborative community, we can actually go ahead and learn new things and build strong detection and prevention solutions to subvert these cyber attacks. You can visit some of these links later on if you want to get some of the work that we have done earlier. Could be beneficial as well and interesting also. So before moving further, I actually want to lay down a disclaimer here. The primary purpose of this talk is just not to enhance the state where exactly how we are exploiting these command and control panels. Rather, the focus is to understand how exactly these CNC panels work, how exactly attackers are building new techniques. And we just want to make sure that as a researchers, we are able to have a strong mechanism to build strong solutions to subvert these cyber attacks. So we want to share this research with the community and making sure that we learn new things out of it, as well as we are just going to enhance the existing state of our security solutions as well. So before moving further, let's just first take a look into data and security breaches, like the present day scenario, how exactly the world is evolving. So we know with the extent of evolution of mobility, the way, the cloud has been, taken into the next generation and how exactly the data is moving between devices. And, the concept of authorization boundary has been somewhat changed, which means that, if you have a multiple devices, the data is moving from the cloud to the devices, from devices to the devices, and just doing the peer kind of communication between devices as well, which means that your data is on a continuous move, right? And in order to understand the sanctity, that why we really need to preserve and secure this data, because data is the keys to the kingdom, right? And more importantly, you can also call data is the new oil these days, right? Because whoever controls data controls the mechanism and, actually go ahead to actually use this data in nefarious purposes as well. With that, if you look at the state of biggest data breaches from 2004 to 2021, it has been a bit of a state of evolutionary as well. So I will also use the word exponential increase in breaches. And why? Because attackers are able to get into organizations, they are able to compromise the systems, they are able to exploit and manipulate users, why technology or why social engineering. But the end result is always be the simple. They want to own the data. If they own the data, they will going to operate on it. And once they operate on it, they need to make sure how exactly they are going to utilize their data. For major reasons, we have to seen that it's for fun and purposes. But right now, I think in the last couple of years, the most of these things have been transformed into for financial gains. So the problem is very real. And let's take a look at it, how exactly it looks in the crimeware world. So when I use a crimeware world, we can also talk about, underground cyber community, where exactly is a kind of a cyberspace or a underground marketplace, which actually being utilized to buy and sell the stolen data, the exfiltrated data, and people can buy this data for many purposes. But exactly, it is a problem that is persisting for a long period of time, but now it has picked up gears as well. And if you can see that some of the examples that we have highlighted here, it is related to some of related to the organizations, individuals, and all that. You can just imagine this is a kind of issue that been prevailing, and we really need to understand the gist of it. But your data is being sold at various places in the underground marketplace, and it's one of the big issue. And with that, we believe that as a security researchers, threat intelligence, or experts in the field, we really need to deep dive into and attack these crimeware, uh, also the botnet command and control panels, also the malicious code, to understand the inherent details, and also want to make sure that we build threat intelligence out of it, which we'll discuss during the course of this talk. Now, moving further, we first really need to just take a quick look into the advanced threats, right? So when we talk about advanced threats, we basically referring to a malicious code that is capable of subverting the integrity of the system, whether it's Windows system, Mac OS, or Linux or Unix, Linux, any flavor of it, right? If the code has the capability to subvert the integrity, I think it has been categorized into the advanced malicious code, because then once the integrity is abused, right, then the malicious code has a capability to perform various kind of nefarious operations in the operating system, to steal data, to manipulate the sanctity of data, and also just to change the underlying baseline of the operating systems as well. And some of the characteristics that we really want to look into as a part of advanced threats is like the malicious code is capable of tampering, hijacking, subverting, being persistent in the operating system, try to modify files, and of course evading the already present security solutions. But also, of course, we understood like these are the advanced threats, right? But at the end of the day, there should be some attribution, right? Like who are the threat actors behind that? So we categorize them into attackers, could be malicious insiders, these could be nation state actors, cybercriminals, and others, right? So this actually gives you the overall holistic approach. Like when we talk about advanced threats, what kind of malicious code we are dealing with. We are not only dealing with the one specific characteristic of the advanced threat, but we are kind of dealing with the multiple variations of it. And that is very important when you try to build any security solution, whether it's a detection or a prevention, or even for like policy enforcement as well. Let's take a look into some of the digital weapons. We use the term digital weapons here for malicious code because the way cyber wars are happening these days, the nation state actors are playing significant role. These are important things to know, right? So when we talk about advanced malicious code, some of the examples we have highlighted here, ransomware, we all know it, right? Earlier we were used to talk about, ransomware is actually targeting end user systems, and then ask for ransom. Right now that advancements have been made, they are targeting cloud infrastructure, databases and all that. We'll take some examples later down the lane as well. Information stealers, remote administration toolkits, payload downloaders, communication hijackers, scanners, service booters, crypto miners. These are some of the variations of the digital weapons at the moment. And at the end of the day, we really need to understand, how this malicious code is being used by the attackers to actually gain influence as well as to steal data, which we'll take a deeper look into. So now at this present point of time, we have looked into what are the data, why it is needed, why attackers are going after the data. And then we also take a look at the advanced threats and what are these. And of course, we look at into the cybercrime world as well, taking the example of the data. Now we are trying to look into some of the real world case studies of how advanced attacks have been carried out and malicious code have been used. So let's take a look into it. The first one we want to talk about is like a Team TNT. It is like, again, threat actors. And they had actually implemented a very interesting attack called as a Kubernetes attack model for crypto mining. So the basic problem persists in the cloud when you deploy your, Kubernetes. and the configuration that you have used exactly in this case is, is not secure. For example, the way you have a kubelet configuration, it has some inherent vulnerability, or the configuration is not secure. So what happened in that case, these guys have a capability to actually launch specific scripts or tools to find vulnerable kubelets. And once they do that, they actually go into the nodes which are running different kind of pods, right? The idea is to compromise one pod and then do the lateral movement and in fact other pods as well. So once the target is accomplished, which in this case is that you control a one node in the cloud environment, and then you are going to install some kind of additional scripts and to actually conduct crypto mining. And the interesting artifact in this case is that attackers are not using their own infrastructure. They are using the infrastructure they have compromised, which could belong to individual users or could belong to organizations as well. So the whole model we have presented here so that you can take a deeper look into. But if we extend this attack scenario, the couple of snapshots that I have added here, it's related to the scripts that have been used by Team TNT here. The first one is like highlighting how they are downloading the file from the remote locations, which means once the pod is compromised in a specific node, it can actually connect to the external resources and then download the files for making changes into the underlying system. And then it can also have a capability to, actually enhance the power of this compromised pods by installing the NVIDIA drivers. So I think they have drafted some very interesting scripts where they check the baseline configuration. And then if they say like NVIDIA drivers are supported, so they fetch the NVIDIA drivers from remote location and actually go after, enhancing the state of the system so that more crypto mining operations can be conducted. And similarly, if you look at it, that's how they are doing it. But the important point that we have to learn out of is they went into the cloud, they compromised the Kubernetes pods, which means they compromise the node, and then they are actually abuse the functionality of node by enhancing the state of performance by downloading more drivers into it so that more efficient crypto mining operations can be done, which means that they are not investing anything, but they are making more money out of it. And then at the end result, organization or individuals user, they are burning their money by actually paying for that GPU usage, right? And that is the one of the cases that, and of course these pods or nodes can also be used for other kind of nefarious operations, for multiple type of, maybe using as a launch pads for conducting other attacks as well. Moving forward, let's take a look into the ransomware that is targeting cloud databases. Recently, in the last 1 year, we have released two different tools. One is called as Straffer, and another is called as Exfiltrate. The purpose of that research was to actually detect ransomware infections in Elasticsearch as well as MongoDB deployments in the cloud. So one of the example that I've highlighted here is the Elasticsearch one. So this is the kind of ransom message that you are able to get once your Elasticsearch is, infected, which means like, they are going to have some indices, and this is having this kind of ransomware message highlighting, hey, your Elasticsearch data has been encrypted or compromised, and then you have to pay the ransom for that. Similarly, in this example of MongoDB, which exactly highlight that, as we all know, MongoDB database as, inherent database, which has a collection, and then the collection has like a different tables and other things, right? In that case, what happened in this scenario is that, they actually go deep inside it, either by simply compromising the host or by just exploiting the MongoDB network service. And once they do that, they are able to actually control the database while just, controlling the collections that are available and also encrypting the data inside it. So what happened in that case, once that happens, so usually you see this kind of ransomware message and all that. So you can see that in the collections, there is system.indexes and readme. And that is exactly looks like how infection is taking place. So as a researchers, what we really need to do here. So if you look at this screenshots that we have placed here, this one is a tool that I've just highlighted, Straffer. It has a capability to detect ransomware infections in the Elasticsearch deployments. So if you utilize this tool, then you can actually able to detect whether either the Elasticsearch instance is infected with ransomware or not. And similarly, you can use the nfilab tool here to actually detect infections in MongoDB instances. Both the tools are available on GitHub, and you can utilize it for your own intelligence and also building further threat intelligence into your products or making some kind of automation scenario in your cloud infrastructure so that you actually detect these kind of attacks in a significant manner. But this is all there. We are seeing these infections, and this is happening at a very, very rapid pace. But as a researchers, penetration testers, we really need to make sure that we should have this capability to take this thing to the next level. Now, if we look into the next, case study that we want to highlight is it is related to the Locky botnet and remote administration toolkit. So this botnet has been, persisting for a bit of long period of time, and this has been advanced from the earlier botnet called as the Aris botnet. And in this particular talk, if we look at it, this had also been extended to a next generation remote administration toolkit, which is called as an RAT here. So if you look at in this screenshot, we are highlighting some of the insidious capabilities that Locky botnet has, like how if your system gets infected by a drive-by download attack, how once the system is compromised, how it is going to connect back to the command and control panel. And this is how it looks like. And once it is connected back to the command and control panel, it can, the command and control panel basically send operational commands to them and, making sure that, these systems are a part of botnet and so that data can be exfiltrated. If you look at the similar scenario here, so this is the management console for the Locky botnet, and I'm highlighting these some of the snapshots because this when we compromise this couple of these botnets to understand what are the inherent details, design and architecture, this gives us a lot of information, and I want to share the same information with the community as well. So just extending it to the next level, if we see, this is an example here for the Locky remote administration toolkit. So this is a toolkit I would say has been heavily used by even the nation state actors or cyber criminals as well to target government institutions. Just try to extract more information about how these institutions and the kind of decisions these institutions are making so that they can actually get more information, and based on that information they make next level of demands, or maybe use that information or sell that information to the other audience as well. So this thread has been heavily used. This is a snapshot which actually highlights some of the internal details, how this RAT is designed and how it is being operated on. So this is basically a sort of source code here, but I just want to highlight that some of the components it entails. But as a remote administration toolkit, we know that advanced attackers actually utilize these kind of tools for gaining complete control, and more importantly, lateral movement inside the organization, and also for the maintaining or having persistence in those compromised systems. So let's take a look into this case study. So this is a exfiltrated data from some of the compromised systems belonging to a specific government agencies. So if you can see that, the remote administration toolkit, which we are talking about, that is the Locky one here, it is able to actually take screenshots or record some of the videos, or while the meetings are taking place, you can say that you can clearly see that looking at the country names here, it also has a capability to extract all the information related to the Outlook client, even the emails, keep on taking screenshots, stealing emails, data inside it. So you can imagine if these kind of tools persist in a very sensitive systems for a long period of time, then how much damage it can be done to the organization, because you keep on getting the updates, enhancements that are happening in the organization and the communication that is going through. And whoever it is, exfiltrating this information, let's say one nation state actor, is going to get all the information related to a target country, that how these guys are making decisions. It's a very, very damaging when it comes to cybersecurity, as well as making sure that, these countries or nation states remain on the top of the methods here, ensuring that we just stay ahead in this arms race, ensuring the business practices and ensuring that business boom happen based on all this information. But this is all real time. This is happening in our world. It is something not that has been cooked upon. It is basically happening. Sometimes we're not able to see it, but is under the hood. A lot of data is being exfiltrated. Moving further, I also want to highlight one of the interesting example of information stealers, which actually means that this can be a part of the botnet code, or this can be also a part of an individualistic deployment. So this depends on how attackers are actually want to use this information stealers. But the purpose is very simple: using try-by download attacks, either by attachments in emails, or by just pushing the user to go to a specific website which is infected, and downloading this malware. Once it gets downloaded onto your end user system, at this point of time the system gets compromised, and the system's sanctity is lost. And at that point of time, the information stealers, because it's residing as a privileged code in the compromised system, it has the capability to steal any information from your browser using man in the browser attack, any client that is connecting with the cloud using man in the cloud attack. It can actually steal your wallet information that is related to your crypto mining stuff that you are doing, or the client that you have installed related to that. It can actually steal all your cookies, web browser sessions, passwords, and all those kind of things. That's why these call as information stealers. And we have highlighted some of the examples of the CNC panel for these stealers, like Raccoon Stealer, Titan, Aurora, Nexus, and Mint. And these are just to name a few in the recent times, but this industry is way bigger. So right now we have touched on several of the advanced threats use cases. Now it's a time for as a security researchers, for people like us, to extend our tactics and actually go after command and control panels to understand how exactly these work, and basically try to compromise them to understand how infections have been triggered. And now in the next section we are going to talk about it. So let's take a look into it. So we have discussed about why we really need to compromise CNC panels. Here you can understand the complete scenario, how the CNC operations are being triggered, from the compromised end user system, CNC server, and the backend database. But the important thing in this case is that why we really need to go after CNC panels, because the information that we are going to obtain from the CNC panel are going to be used for building threat intelligence. We can jam the somewhat communication channel, understand how the CNC channels are communicating with the end user systems, and we can analyze the exfiltrated data to build proactive detections and solutions, including policies to prevent security breaches that could happen. For example, if one geographical location on the internet is being targeted by the advanced malware, right? Let's say it's happening in Asia region, but that infection can also be triggered into the US region or Canada region, right? So staying proactive in this space actually help us to build defensive mechanisms and doing policy enforcement, which actually help us to actually reduce the impact of these attacks. So that's why we really need to go after this kind of scenario as a part of our threat research. So right now, the first case study that I want to talk about in this case is that the CNC panel exploiting time-based SQL injection. So recently, Nexus Android CNC panel, we are able to get an access to, and we were able to find vulnerability. And this work has been done in collaboration with one of my peer, Rohit. And we discovered this vulnerability, and we are able to exploit it. And I want to demo that vulnerability and how we exactly exploited it in front of you, so that people can understand how exactly we really need to attack these CNC panels. So here is the case, the CNC panel of Nexus Android botnet, and here exactly how the exploit is being triggered using a SQL map tool. But so when we are able to actually successfully able to exploit that vulnerability, so we are able to access the panel, and you can see there's a CNC panel here. Exactly what we are seeing, the web injects Uh, Here, the web injects example of how exactly it has built in called for targeting Chase Bank, Morgan Stanley, and many others. But this is only possible if you are able to successfully exploit the vulnerability. And let's take a look into it uh, through this demo. So right now you can clearly see we are actually landing on this web resource, which is a host having a HTTP service on 669 TCP port. And of course, there's a CNC panel of the Nexus Android botnet. And we don't know the password. What I'm trying to highlight here is that we don't know anything about it. And we just found that, the credentials are not working. And here is they have like API resource. So what we really need to find out in this case is that after doing due diligence and some interesting work, we are able to find some of the web resources, and we use the SQL map tool here with this resources and try to exploit this resource because we've found that there's a vulnerability in it and SQL injection is possible. Now you can see that the tool is running. It successfully detected time-based blind SQL injection. It's further going on. Let's take a look into it. And now it has figured out the database is Nexus. It's still doing some statistical model comparison, looking at what kind of data is there, and because it's a time-based SQL injection, so it's gonna go step by step, and there will be a delay. So now you'll see that it able to detect some random string starting with D, and let's take a look into it. So now it is retrieving us some sort of username of that database, which is a Nexus here. So voila. So what happened right now with a successful exploitation of vulnerability, we are able to get the username and password. And let's use this username and a password to log in back into the CNC panel. And there we go. So now this case study highlighted the fact that at that point of time, when we are able to exploit that vulnerability, once you get a successful response, basically you get the credentials of the CNC panel and you are able to log back into it for building more threat intelligence. And this is one of the use case, very important one, because most of the CNC panels are built in PHP, and you can figure out a lot of injection vulnerabilities in that as well. So one such example have been presented in front of you. Now, the next one I want to highlight here is that the CNC vulnerable design, another use case where we have actually discovered looking at the design of the command and control panel and the architecture. So what happened in this case, if you look at it, this screenshot, although I have did a lot of interesting details, and later on, if you want to dig deeper. So what we have found that we launched a Rust scan, again, this IP address, which is hosting the CNC panel, and you can clearly see in this particular IP address, we got TCP port 4308, 4306, and many in the similar fashion on the same host, right? Kind of pretty interesting. And we picked up 401 TCP port open here because we sent the SYN packet and it's acknowledged, which highlighted that this port is open. And let's see if we can connect to this port or not. So what we did in this case, we actually, because we are trying to abuse the functionality of the SOCKS proxy, so we use that host IP address into the SOCKS proxy here. And what we are trying to do in this case is that from the testing machine, we are acting as like our system is infected and compromised. So when we get our, just get the IP address of our testing machine here, and we are going to feed that IP address back into the HTTP proxy, although we have configured the SOCKS host as 4011 here. So after specifying the SOCKS proxy address, we pass on the TCP on the TCP port 4011 here. We provided the HTTP proxy as the IP address over our own system. And what happened in that case? So what happened after that? You can clearly see once we pass that and initiate the connectivity, and you can clearly see we initiated the scan here as well. And those scans highlighted the IP address listed here, which is related to the infected systems on the internet. And if you look at it, this entry where we pass the SOCKS proxy address, our infected system, which is a testing machine, also becomes a part of the botnet. So in this case, it is a part that the way they have implemented the SOX proxy functionality. But what we did, we created a one testing machine. We actually become a HTTP proxy and connect to the remote host via the SOX proxy. And what happened in that case is that our testing machine becomes a part of the botnet because the CNC panel treated it as an infected system. So as a part of it, by simply scanning the CNC host here, we are able to decipher and enumerate how the infections are being triggered by this botnet and how CNC panel is maintaining the data. This is a very interesting case study. And let's just quickly take a look into this demo that actually clarifies a lot of interesting things. It should be quick, 1 minute. So this is the case study related to system BC panel. And you can clearly see when we access this resource, we got the access denied. And this was the host at that point of time. So what we did in this case is we use the simple nmap tool here, and we want to scan this particular remote IP with this port range. And you can clearly see at this point of time, we are able to see a lot of TCP ports are being opened, similar on the one, which highlighted that, there's a lot of infected systems are connected to this CNC panel here. And since we had that access to the system, you can clearly see once we log in back into that system BC panel, you can see this 4022 entry here. It is also an entry here, which is further mapping back to the infected system. So this highlights the fact that even if you are not able to log in back into the command and control panel, but you can scan the host and extract a lot of threat intelligence out of it as well. It's a very typical and a specific case study. So I have highlighted a lot of details into it. Later on, you can look into it and analyze it. But it should be a part of your penetration testing strategy and security threat research that you are doing to ensure that you gain more information out of it. Moving further, this is one example of unsecure resources leaking stolen information. So we also figured that CNC panel host, like for example, hosted here, it has a random directory name and another random directory in it. But once you get access to it, you are able to see a lot of stolen data in a zipped format without any authentication. So in that case, you can actually download data from the CNC host on the fly as well. Further, this is also an example of the blackguard information stealer. So this is the look of their CNC panel. And what we have also discovered in this case, like if you specific scenarios in the remote host, if you are able to find this path like files, and sometimes these are not secured properly, which means that authorization and authentication controls are not enforced. And if you're able to figure it out, then you are able to download a lot of data belonging to different countries which are being infected, right? So from security and threat research perspective, our target is not to actually abuse this data, but our target is to understand how these information stealers are actually targeting the end user devices on the internet, so that we can work with the security community, we can work with the incident response team by the governments to ensure that the impact is minimized and the risk is taken care of. But this should be a part of your threat research strategy. Another interesting case study here is
Excuse me, Dr.
very
Sood.
interesting one.
Excuse me, I apologize to interrupt, but we only have a minute or two left in the talk. So I'll have to ask you to wrap up, and maybe we can figure out how folks can contact you directly for questions or follow-up, if you don't mind. Pardon the interruption. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this was the last one at the moment in this use case study, which is guest access. So you got a hard-coded key, then you are able to actually get a complete control, basically, in this case, a guest access, and you can see how the infections are being triggered. So these are some of the use cases that we had discussed. Now I added this section into the talk called a cyber wars and data abuse paradigm. It talks about cyber wars, data abuse paradigm in a detail, like data destruction, exfiltration, and denial of service. A very important one, where we have added some examples related to the Whispergate Viper action based on the Ukraine and Russian war that is going on and the cyber war that triggered. And this model actually gives you the idea what kind of data is being stolen from there as a part of this. So you can kind of take a look into it. Moving further, these are some of the example and screenshots that we discovered that exfiltrated as a part of that operation. And you can see that, the kind of information is being leaked. So again, the third part that was a part of it was like denial of service. You can take a look at it, how they exactly targeted to impact the availability of the internet in those areas happens pretty well. So you can look into it. We can discuss that things later on, but all the information is available here. Conclusion, we just want to make sure that what we learn out of it is data is the new currency. We really need to use the offensive approach for threat intelligence. Information from the command and control panel should be utilized to build advanced threat intelligence. Make sure your security solutions are advancing with passage of time, because it's an arms race. Whoever stays up front will win it. Threat intelligence is the most important part. Make sure your penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, threat research strategy should go for these kind of case studies that we have discussed upon. At last, I would really like to be very thankful to everybody who attended this talk, and I hope you guys are gonna gain some interesting out of it. Feel free to contact me. Slides will be shared with the FirstCon, and you can get all those details from there. Really appreciate all your support. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay, we kind of did run out of time for questions, but I suppose if anybody wants to stay after the session, Dr. Sood, perhaps you can stay on the Zoom for a couple of minutes for direct questions if you don't mind. So we'll do it that way. So thank you so much.
Yeah.